a Border Patrol helicopter that apparently has been put to use to protect a what is known as Line 3. It is an oil pipeline in segments of the Enbridge pipeline that runs through northern Minnesota. It is there are, I think, at least Ojibwe people who are protesting Line 3, as well as local activists, and somehow this is just, I think, a perfectly naked illustration of how the functioning of our government, how our government, maybe one could argue any government, but certainly the way in which our government works to service private profits. Here is a ostensibly Border Patrol helicopter. It's Customs and Border Protection, not Border Patrol. They are different agencies. This is, they're using their helicopter, what do you call those? Not the propellers, the rotors, to try and essentially intimidate activists who are occupying a pump station for Line 3, I guess, north of Park Rapids. Here it is.
You got glasses? Any kind? All right.
So that was from Evan Frost. I just want to give him credit.
Right.
A photojournalist who I believe works for the Montana. I'm not exactly sure, but he got that footage.
First off, it seems like a fairly dangerous tactic to use, using a helicopter in that way. But it also is, a prime example of how we're going to, it's just an extension of the socialization of the costs and the privatization of the profits here for this, particularly in an era where we need to be doing far less of transportation of fossil fuels because we need to burn far less.
Well, it's also, I think, just a real indication of how cops and our police forces are meant to be vehicles of social control, and that's their maintenance job. And they're also serving capital. And there were, I think, over 20 water protectors chained to the equipment there as that helicopter was flying so low. They were engaged in a form of civil disobedience, and police are using every tactic in their book in order to protect their real citizenry, which is the pipeline and the corporation that owns it.
Yeah, if Custer could have buzzed the Hunk Papas with a helicopter back in 1876, he would have. But all he had was cavalry back then. But it's the exact same thing.
Yeah. And then, and not to mention the privatized forces that come straight from the war and become part of these like privatized mechanisms that either, whether it's police or not, it's like, what was interesting about that helicopter was that was actually a DHS helicopter.
It was my understanding is that it was a customs and this is
Customs and Border
according
Patrol.
to Evan Frost, Customs and Border Protection, which
Yeah.
I imagine is an agency under DHS.
I'm surprised they didn't call for some other private. Yeah, I want to know more about the land. Like, is it right up against the border? Is it within that like zone where rights don't exist because of, I don't know if you guys know that, like there's limited, citizens don't have the same rights that you do when you're within a certain border range that you do like when you're out of that range. And I'm curious like how close that was to the Canadian border and if that's sort of the excuse that they're using for these types of tactics. Whereas normally they would outsource it to some sort of private company.
Well, like they did in Standing Rock. I mean, there
Exactly.
was a private policing company that was attacking water protectors with dogs, and then of course just the entire seemingly state of North Dakota with all their militarized gear. They also did the more official policing tactics of tear gas and rubber bullets and arresting journalists
Fair.
like Amy Goodman. So that's the state
Oh yeah.
allowed violence, but the more queasy stuff they outsource to those private mercenary types.